In this video, we will go over how to graph the greatest integer function. The greatest integer functions, we have this notation to represent it. The output of the greatest integer function of x will be the greatest integer that is less than or x or equal to x. Recall that integers has to be whole numbers, positive or negative or zero. So the output is always going to be a whole number. Okay. All right, so -2, if we were to input a -2 in there, the biggest integer that is less than or equal to 2, so equal to 2 is going to be fine. The greatest integer that's less than or equal to 2 is going to be -2 is going to be -2. The biggest integer that's less than or equal to -1 is going to be a -1. The biggest integer that is less than or equal to 0, it can't be bigger than 0, is going to be 0. The greatest integer that's less than or equal to 1, it's 1. It can equal to 1. We want to find a greatest integer that's less than or equal to 2. That's going to be 2. So let's plot these points. -2, -2. -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. Now it looks like it's a line, but it's not. It's not, because remember that the output is always going to be integers. So the y value on the graph is always going to be whole numbers and not a decimal. So we can't have a point that's right here where the y value is 1 point something. So now we have to pick some more values to see what the graph will look like. Now, if we were to pick a 0.5 for x, what is the biggest integer, the closest integer to 0.5, but it can't not be greater than 5. It has to be less than 5. The closest integer to 5, but less than 5. That's going to be 0. So when x is equal to 0.5, the y value is going to be 0. Let's say x equals 0.9. The greatest integer that is less than or equal to 0.9. So we want the integer to be very, very close to 0.9, but it has to be less than or equal to 0.9. So the integer has to be 0. It can't be 1 because 1 would be bigger and not less than or equal to. So if we input a 0.9, we're going to end up with a 0 as well. So if we put in a 0.2 or 0.1 or 0.3, we're going to end up with a 0. But if we were to put in a 1, we're going to end up with a 1. So right here, we're going to have an open circle. Because when we input the x value 1, the output will be 2 and not 0. Okay. Now let's see if we put in a 1.5. The biggest integer that is less than or equal to 1.5. It cannot be 2 because 2 is bigger than 1.5. It has to be less than 1.5. So the biggest integer that's very close to 1.5, but less than 1.5 or equal to 1.5 would be 1. So the output for 1.5 is going to be 1. So 1.5 is the x, 1 is going to be the y. And then if we were to pick x equals 1.7, the biggest integer that is less than or equal to 1.7 is going to be 1. 1.7, 1. So again, when the x value is 1.7, the y value is going to be 1. So all the values that has a decimal of 1 point something is going to have an output of 1. At 2, because the output at 2 is going to be 2, we're going to have an open circle right here. Okay. All right, so similarly, if we were to pick x equals 2.5, the biggest integer that's less than or equal to 2.5 is going to be 2. Can't be bigger than 2.5, so it's going to be that point right there. And then at 3, the biggest integer that's less than or equal to 3 is going to be 3, so it's going to be a point 3, there. And then right here, we're going to have an open circle. And we're going to draw a little segment right here to represent if we were to put in a 2.9, the output would be 2. 2.1, output would be 2, and so on. So we can kind of see the pattern right here. Now let's finish off the pattern here. Okay, to understand, let's try plug in x equals a negative 0.5 and see what it looks like. The absolute value of negative 0.5, sorry, not the absolute value, the greatest integer of negative 0.5. It can be bigger than negative 0.5, smaller than or less than, but it has to be an integer. It has to be an integer, so that would be a negative 1. Because 0 will be bigger than negative 0.5, so we can't pick that. So the output for negative 0.5 is going to be negative 1. So as you can see here, 0.5 for x, the y value is going to be negative 1. All right, so this is what the graph of the greatest integer function looks like. This is also called the step function. Just because it kind of looks like a staircase where you can step up. All right.